something up here to do it, because one of the things I hear from athletes all the time is, I know I have the tools to be successful, I'm just not accessing it. So what gave you that invitation to access it?
I think it's here, but I also think it's here. If it's not here, then there's no way it's here. Okay. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if it's not in your heart, then you're not going to get out of bed every single day on those hard days, on those days where you don't want to do it, right? Because we all have that. There's no secret to that.
Mm-hmm.
If you tell me every day you wake up and you're like, yeah, I feel like $1 million, no, you're going to go through ups, downs, this, that, and the other throughout those days. And some of us have tools, and some of us don't. But on those days, you have to find a way to break through. So for me, that was the biggest possible thing. Finding a way to break through on those days where you don't want to break through.
See, that's so critical, though, because so many people see those bad days as a reflection or judgment of themselves versus this is the challenge day. You didn't look for your A+ day, right? Tell me about. I think the reason I wanted to have you on was twofold. One is, we talk a lot about strategy, we talk a lot of swing, we talk about a lot of things in sports, but club fitting is so critical, because if you don't do it right, people find themselves in trouble. And a lot of my buddies that I play with are like, they're changing heads and all this, and they're not getting fit. Why is it so important for the best players in the world to be fit properly?
Well, it's important for everybody. I mean, and granted, and I have to say this out loud, because getting fit in today's game, it's expensive. It's a cost, right? It would be considered still, although essential, it's still a luxury item. If you're going to go out and buy a brand new set of sticks, and if you take your game seriously, meaning you want to get better and you're going to invest your time in your game, and you're going to go out and buy new golf clubs and get them fit, because it's only to your benefit to have tools that are made for you.
Welcome back to Mental Game Live, episodes number 23. It's the magic number. It's the Michael Jordan number. It's the number of dominance and dynasties and great players and doing all that other stuff. And we're here with Bhrett Basham, my teammate, my bullpen mate. He's catching the fire, bringing the heat, all the other stuff that goes with it. And Basham had a wonderful birthday this past weekend, so happy birthday, brother.
Thanks so much.
You turn any magical numbers, or are we just still staying in the numbers?
No, I'm still in the 34 to 40 age range.
Okay.
So put it that way.
It sucks when you start having to scroll down on the age ranges of all the drop-down lists. I'm just telling you.
It's tough.
Dude, you still got a long way to go. I was graduating high school when you were born.
Perspective.
Yeah, perspective.
It's perspective.
All right, let's talk about perspective for a minute. We're going to talk about failing tonight and what do you do after a massive disappointment. There's a reason for that. But we can't start tonight's show without talking about the events of 9/11 that happened 22 years ago today. And 22 years ago, I'll give you my story about where I was, but you were probably, in third grade?
I was a freshman in high school.
Okay, freshman in high school? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What class?
English. We were changing classes, and they came over. Remember, our principal came over the PA system and was like, everyone be calm, it's gonna be fine. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah. So I had no idea what was going on. So it was a class change, and then get to my next class, and we're just locked into the TV. And I called my mom. So I was like, I'm gonna go home. Because there were, full disclosure, grew up in Tennessee, Knoxville.
Oak Ridge.
You're correct. Familiar with Oak Ridge National Laboratory, had some workings with a Manhattan Project and whatnot. So radioactive materials in Oak Ridge. And I was like, so one of my classmates' parents worked at Oak Ridge National Lab, and they were on heightened alert. And I was like, shit, what's going to happen? I mean, at this point, it's an unknown.
Nobody knows what's going on.
Are they going to attack this or whatever? So I was like, I was 15. I was scared to death.
Yeah. If you're following us tonight, we're going to be talking about disappointment. We're going to dive into 9/11 here. If you're on Instagram Live, if you got a question, make sure you hit us up over there on YouTube. We're going to be talking about how to manage disappointment and all the factors that go with it and the emotions that flood, not when you lose a football game and you're sitting in the stands. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about when you put your heart and soul into something. 9/11 happened when I was on internship. We were living in Providence, Rhode Island, right in the epicenter between Boston and New York. I was actually in the VA Medical Center at the time and had walked out of a group of veterans, many that were still World War II veterans and some Vietnam era veterans, and walk out and everybody's huddled around a TV. We were running a group. I was running a group for smoking cessation, stop smoking. And we walk out and we see it and we were like, holy cow. And then before we could even get down the hallway, the next one hit because we missed the original one. And my wife was home. She had just worked a night shift. So she, she had been asleep. Her mom called her and told her what was going on. And, all the kids were watching, my two daughters were watching Nickelodeon and stuff like that because they didn't stop that. But it was very surreal being in a VA medical center. And I grew up in the military. I grew up, like you said, near those types of bases, Oak Ridge. And then we moved to Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge is the home of the refineries. And so it was definitely a surreal moment living in Providence between Boston and New York City. 3 days later, they pulled over a gentleman that they thought was one of the hijackers off of an Amtrak train in downtown Providence, which was about a mile from our house, because they thought he was one of the terrorists. When come to find out, he was a Sikh, a nonviolent religious sect, and they carried the swords and all the other stuff. And he was in New York during the attacks and was seen running from his hotel. Well, he was running from his hotel to get to his Amtrak. He was running late. And so they pulled him over. He had nothing to do with it. But then about a week later, I look out my window and there's a series of hazmat cars right out in the bottom where they thought there was a bomb. And I walk out of my office and there's men walking in hazmat suits because they thought we had an anthrax. It was just heightened times. I always find myself watching TV at this time, and if you've never been to the 9/11 Memorial in New York City, make it a first stop if you do in New York. It is harrowing. It is frightening. It is a brilliant tribute to the men and women who lost their lives and did so much bravery in that time. It was a defining moment of our country. And it's kind of, it's one of those moments that you look back that everybody knows where you were, but more than that is look at how the world has changed since.
I would also say too, if you want something like fascinating, you're a history buff, you need to, I don't think he does it anymore. I think last year was the last year he did it.
Yep.
But Ari Fleischer was he the chief of staff or was he the press secretary?
He was the press secretary.
So Ari Fleischer on Twitter, X or whatever the hell it's called now. He took extensive notes as W. Bush's press secretary. He's with him every step of the way on Air Force One, all that. And he basically timestamps from the time that the president woke up that morning in, I believe it was in Florida, and through the whole day of 9/11, 2001. And he's basically giving you a behind-the-scenes look of everything that they did on Air Force One, the struggles that they had getting in the air, where are they going to land, how are they taking care of the president. It's super fascinating if you've never followed along.
I would watch that every single year. Mm-hmm. And then last year, he said it was his last year. And the conspiracy theorists out there say, you know why it's his last year? He doesn't do it anymore.
I don't know why.
Because he became the publicist for the Live Golf Tour. So whether or not it's true or not, it's interesting timing. Anyway, go there. But, I'm sure somebody's going to send me that message and say that's what it is. And so it's just interesting, right?
That's a conversation. That's another whole mental game live there.
That is. And we're going to let that one go, like the events that are happening up in college football right now with a coach. We're going to let that one go. We're not going to talk about it because don't know the case, don't know what's going on. Although I know the parties involved, I'm going to back out of it. I know him briefly. I know him a little bit. But let's talk about disappointment. We got a couple questions already popping in. The plot thickens, JJ. You're right. And we're going to talk about some disappointment. And I'm going to tell you why I decided to do this. Mental Game Live, and I want y'all's feedback that are watching and are regulars. And we appreciate you guys. Trust me. Y'all, men and women, from all over the world. I always bounce back and forth between great guests, great content, great material. When we started Mental Game Live, we wanted to have different segments that people could learn on how to go through the mental game. And then we had guests. People said they love that, then they love back. So we go back and forth. The thing about Mental Game Live is we can do whatever the hell we want to do. But the problem with Mental Game Live is we can do whatever the hell we want to do, which means I don't know if you guys like it, don't like it, want more of it, don't want more of that. I just love it because it's a chance to get on here and riff on the mental game and answer questions. And if one person's here, that'd make 3 of us. And if there's, whatever, I watch the download rates. We do it. And I know a lot of people consume this material in short snippets and wait till afterwards. So I thank everybody who dials in and sends messages. Your questions and the ability to answer your questions is what it's all about. And we'll continue to do that. So if you like the free flow nature, we'll just keep free flowing based on what we want to do. And I want to keep it somewhat relevant where something happens. I don't want to be like, hey, let's talk about ice hockey right now. Sorry, Tom. But nobody's paying attention to ice hockey in September when college football season started. And so we want to talk about things that are relevant. And so if you have any comments, make sure you just hit us up on social media, hit us up on through our website, or leave comments here. And we appreciate it.
We're open to anything.
What's that?
So we're open to anything. You literally cannot tell us anything that we've never heard before.
Correct. And we won't be disappointed. But that leads us to this next point. Okay.
Great segue.
How you like that? Put us in radio, right? This segment is sponsored by So-and-so Mattress Company. Make sure you need a good night rest. The disappointment. So it's funny doing this job, being involved in people's lives. I have this 1 or 2 step removed from people's performance. I want players to play well. I want players to have the success that they want in their life. I want players to have the success that I believe that they put in the effort to achieve. This past weekend, I wrote a new presentation, gave it called the Dynasty Driven Mindset. And it was a mindset presentation. If anybody's out there in the business world and wants a great presentation on what it takes to be in a dynasty, I've been a part of 2 dynasties. I'm watching another one happen in golf a little bit with a couple players. But I've been firsthand in 2 major dynasties, LSU baseball and Alabama football. Although I'm not responsible for Alabama football, I just get to see it. I'm studying, observing, soaking up everything. I'm a contributor there. I'm no more the person behind it. There's one person behind it, and we'll just leave it at that. That being said, I find that we spend so much of our time trying to be at this heightened level that we jump out of our airplanes, we fly, we do all this stuff without a safety net. And the safety net is not a plan B. The safety net is not having 1 foot outside holding on for dear life. The safety net is knowing how to crash land. And when players call me, they text me, and they're like, dude, I suck today, man. I'm terrible. I'm the worst player in the world. And I'm like, what happened? And we start going through the issues. We start talking through the scenarios and the events. It always seems to come down to 2 or 3 things that went bad. And it can cascade. But it's a couple moments during the point of competition where the competition turns and it goes against you. The current shifts. And sometimes that's due to our own cause, and sometimes it's just due to circumstance. Do not be naive to think that you will always generate an outcome in your favor. If you are, you need to get against a better competition. Competition is going to go against you at least 50% of the time if you're in a competitive environment. Okay, winning and losing. Now in golf, it's much different, and we can define winning in a lot of different ways. But you watch teams, you watch sports, and people put their heart and soul into something. If they don't do that, then they mitigate, they protect against feeling down, disappointed, and frustrated. And I don't want a player who ever is protected against disappointment. I kind of have a rule: when somebody plays bad, I rarely text them or anything afterwards, at least for 24 hours. The reason is I want them to process it. I don't want somebody to put powdered sugar on their crap. If they're hurting, I want them to deal with it. But very few people, Bash, understand the depth of how to manage disappointment. And we can lose momentum. We can lose confidence. It can send us and spiral us. It can last 1 day, 1 minute, 1 season. It can go on for a long time. You can watch the college football season, for instance. Teams at the beginning of the season have a ton of confidence and belief, and all of a sudden something goes wrong. And there's a bunch of people looking around like, oh my God, what's happening? And then 6 weeks from now, people stop buying in. They mail it in. They're like, it's too much. It's too hard. And that effort isn't there. Or they lose faith in the process of what they're doing. It can happen in golf. It can happen in tennis. It can happen in pitching, where people get scar tissue built up. But the biggest thing of what tonight's all about is why disappointment becomes toxic, and then how to healthy manage disappointment. So I think we put together some slides for tonight, didn't we? Mm-hmm. Okay. You want to load up? Let's go to the unhealthy one first there, Bash. We got that one up there?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Pull it up real quick.
Okay. All right. So what I want you to understand by doing this and seeing this is that looks great, by the way. What I want people to understand is that disappointment is going to happen in the course of competition. It has to. Okay. One of my favorite shows, I've talked about this a lot. What's one of my favorite shows, Bash? You know?
Do you watch so many, it's hard to keep track.
I know. Different phase of life right now. One of my favorite shows is a show called Air Disasters.
Ah, dang. Yeah, I knew that.
Okay. And if you haven't watched Air Disasters, it's fantastic. Okay. I am a very frequent flyer, and there are times I'm like, oh man, I'd hate to be that person on that plane.
Yeah, so let's just watch Air Disasters.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. But I mean, listen, we're going to Rome in 2 weeks. We watched The Godfather this weekend. Not because we're going to Rome, but because we watched the show The Offer. I had never seen The Godfather. Okay, there it is. Never seen it. Have you seen it?
Mm-mm.
Oh, it's brilliant. Brilliant. I want to watch Godfather 2 now. Anyway, I digress. Okay, so disappointment, right? When we watch Air Disasters, we will never be the best aviation experts, pilots, navigators, computer specialists, unless we have accidents. And in the case of an accident, knock on wood, in the case of an airplane accident, they send an entire different organization out to investigate. They don't allow the executives of the airline. They don't allow all the people like that to go in there and muddle with it. In fact, they have to turn it over to the NTSB, the National Travel and Safety Board, or Transportation and Safety Board. Okay. The reason for that is those investigators are engineers and aviation experts and pilots, and they piece it back together to identify what may have happened, why those conditions aligned, and then what we can do to prevent that in the future. And it's non-judgmental. Well, in medicine, they have what's called M&Ms, morbidity and mortality meetings after a patient has a bad outcome. And you better just let go of your ego when you go in those meetings. The reason is we can all learn from them. In the military, they have after action reports where you get together afterwards, and it doesn't matter how successful things were. They will tear you apart because there's always a way to improve. Well, what happens in sports is because we put our emotions and our ego and attach it to that outcome so much, okay? What happens is we want that success to happen with such intensity that we either become, it's either all or nothing. And the nothing becomes this deep despair and crater of disappointment. And yet there's so many things that could have happened well and gone well during the course of the competition. And those 2 or 3 decision points, those inflection points that happened during the course of competition may have redirected the path of our journey. But yet when we're so caught up in our own ego that we can't get to the third person, 30,000 foot view and see those changes, what happens is we just crush all over our own ego. We pee in our own cereal. We get mad at ourselves and we're down. Now, let me ask you, when you played, Bash, when you had a bad game, how did you get over it?
Wish that the next one would come right away.
Okay. Were you verbally angry?
Was I verbally angry?
Yeah. Did you verbalize?
No, I internalized everything.
Okay, you internalized. That's not a shock. Knowing your personality, I kind of did the same thing. I thought I was letting people down. I thought I was losing my last opportunity, but I'd also get angry. Like I punch cinder block walls on occasion. And so that's why I always tell people I can't be upset when somebody gets angry. I never threw anything or hit anybody. Probably felt like it a few times. But I would have this initial burst of energy, and then I didn't know how to deal with it. I never had a plan on how to evaluate my performances so that I could pull the pearls out of what that was. Instead, I tended to compound them. And I started to build more avoidance of what I was trying to do. And that's exactly what happens with this unhealthy disappointment management. We have an emotional surge that happens immediately near the end. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to sound, you may disagree with this, but I'm going to challenge you on this. Most people do not fear failure. They fear the moment they know they have failed. When it is, in a football game, when all of a sudden you realize the game is now over, it's official. There's no other last chance. In baseball, when you know that holy crap, that last out was just recorded, like boom, the pop happens. Because a minute or two later, all of a sudden it's like, all right, let's go. We're down, but we start moving on. It's that moment when it realizes, and I hate to say it like this, but it hit me as why. Well, my dad passed away on 9/10/11. So 12 years ago yesterday. And we for 2.5, 3 years, we waited for phone calls all the time. And when the phone call actually came to say he was going into hospice, and it would probably be less than 24 hours, it wasn't there was a sense of relief. It was when the balloon popped. Because we automatically transitioned to, okay, now we move into this. It was no more about what's going to happen. And I think a lot of times what happens is this emotional surge and mental confusion of we're resisting and trying not to fail, not to struggle, not to get disappointed. We're holding everything back, builds up on us so much that resistance, and it goes to almost ignorance, right? Like, I'm not going to lose. I'm not. And we ignore the facts that whether we're losing or what's causing the loss or what we need to do to improve, that ignorance is causing us to dig ourselves a deeper hole. And as a result, we avoid more. We avoid the negative emotions. We avoid reality. We put up a false fake. And what happens is the only way to deal with it is we first externalize. We get mad at the game. We get mad at the thing. We start transferring the blame. Now, here's the difference. People like you and me, Bash, we internalize much faster. Okay. In today's culture, we tend to see a lot more externalization due to social media. So this phase may last longer in some people, and internalization may be shorter. Well, those who have very low self-awareness are going to cause more problems with externalization. And you can see where the toxic nature happens. Okay. The internalization is also toxic at times, because what happens is we start taking this, we lose emotional discipline, and we start becoming reactionary. We start chasing fixes and feel goods, trying to get out. You wanted to hurry up and get back into play. That may not have been the best idea. Okay. It may have been time just to get away and allow everything to slow back down. Okay. Mm. But what happens is we want to hurry up and get back into it. Disappointment, the fear of it, the avoidance is building up. We want to hurry up and get back into it because we can't sit in our own misery. So we externalize, we blame others, we blame conditions, and it's like institutional barriers. Like this place, nobody gets better here. Nobody helps us here, blah, blah, blah. It's environmental barriers. I never get any playing time. I never get stuff like that. It's, things like that, right? The internalization, I'm not good enough. I'll never make it. We compare ourselves down. See where the emotional discipline goes, okay? Then what happens is we start trying to protect ourselves. The externalization and the internalization, those processes are actually very painful. And so eventually what happens is we stop beating ourselves up and we start protecting. And we start protecting what we do in the way we think by shifting it.
And some of it is by being hard on ourselves, but at least that gets us out of our pathway. Or behaviorally, we try to start fixing problems. And that last stage of an unhealthy disappointment is that we start doing everything we can so that that doesn't happen again. It's not healthy. We can't succeed to not fail. We cannot compete to not fail. We have to compete to try to achieve everything we possibly can. When we have an unhealthy disappointment management, we create a very toxic cycle where we become hyper vigilant on everything we're doing. We attack ourselves and we don't learn from the moment. We start using every short-term facet that we can, looking for a quick fix to get us out of it. And we never get better because we're constantly in this negative cycle, in this negative loop of blaming others, blaming ourselves, blaming circumstance, comparing ourselves to others because we can't handle how bad it feels to suck in that moment. Does that make sense, Bash?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Any questions on a shitty disappointment management?
No, I think it kind of nails it. I've honestly never seen it broken down before.
Pretty good, isn't it?
So I would say for me, I would think I don't know. I was a weird player. I probably was more anxious than I ever thought I was.
Yep.
I was the kind of person who, and it came majority of the time hitting and at the plate, it was like I had to get hit the first at bat or the entire day was just playing catch up. Right. If I didn't get hit at first at bat, well, the pressure keeps building and building and building until the fourth at bat. I'm like, I can barely hold the bat. I'm so freaking tight.
But that's avoidance, okay, and fear of future success because it becomes superstitious where I have to have an early success to put one in the bank.
Yeah.
Okay. And that lack of vulnerability is very common in athletes. I mean, I wanted to have a good first pitch, the first good hitter. I wanted to have, I hear golfers all the time saying, I want to get off to a good start. All those other things, that's important, right? Nobody wants to have a shitty start to a day, but we can still have a great day because of that. But what happens is we start playing because of avoidance. There's a really good idea that superstitions or superstitious thinking in sports is just nothing more than an avoidance mechanism. It's kind of magical thinking on how to reduce anxiety.
Good point.
Yep.
Never thought about it like that.
Huh?
So I never thought about it like that.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I was the most superstitious person ever.
Well, I tell you mine. I kept the same thing in my sock. I always had one thing in the back pocket. I threw the same number of warm-up pitches before the game. I didn't eat the same thing every day, but
no, it was more so like when I got to the park is like put the uniform on the exact same way. And if I for somehow I zoned out or whatever, I had to start the process again. If I did something out of turn, I had to start it over. And then I do the same stretching warm up for the same amount of seconds. And if it gets off turn, I gotta start over. Dude, I'm just the worst.
No.
I had so many problems.
Remember what we talk about in competition, right? When we get into competition over practice, we have high control, low consequence. But when we go to competition, we go to high consequence, low control. So superstitious behavior is all about trying to exert control over an uncontrollable force. Okay. I think we have something called that coming out, don't we? Kick anxiety ass, how to control the uncontrollable force in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's coming out pretty soon. More to come on that, y'all. The anxiety book is coming. But what happens is we exert that to try to gain control, which gives us a little bit of relief when you've done everything right. But what happens is it's really unpredictable. It has no control. So what you're doing in that situation is you're trying to avoid the disappointment. I'm running my mouse over avoidance, like you can see that. It's trying to control the avoidance so that we don't put ourselves into a situation and we're internalizing control more than anything else for the fear of the future. So you're much more, it's kind of interesting how those would work for you up on the top shelf versus the bottom shelf. Okay.
Yeah.
And you were much more into that world because that you're trying to mitigate and protect against those negative events. Okay. So it's a real interesting thing. Okay. But there is a healthier way to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
But we've all been around where guys blame umpires. You see players go out in the media and blame social media. They blame their coaches. They blame circumstances. They blame, background. They blame opportunities. I see players like in the golf world. I didn't get picked to travel. Like we came in 7th in qualifying. They take 5. Okay. It's really, well, I know I can do it. I totally get it. But at the same time, win qualifying and you get to go. Okay. And, it's one of those things that I think we, have to understand the things that we can control. So let's go to the healthy one. We've been in the gutter long enough. Let's go to the healthy one. So if you want to have a healthy management, healthy disappointment, okay, here's how we do it. Oh, I like that green. Okay, just spring these on me. Okay.
Positive.
All right. During the course of events, we're always going to have an emotional surge. And it's always going to be chaos and confusing. Always. Okay. It's hard. And when you're in the battle, there's times it goes south and there's times that it turns on us. But the difference between the first one, where we have more negative emotions and more avoidance, is that when we're understanding where we are and we can recognize that things are going south, I'm in the process of losing, I've got to take a higher view of this. Okay. What happens is we know we're going to have some negative emotions, but we're aware of it and we're non-judgmental. I am pissed and angry right now. I'm hurt. I'm frustrated. Those are facts. Don't ever try to suppress emotions. Don't. But what I don't want you to do, if you read Mindside Manifesto, I talk about the influence of primary and secondary emotions. Primary emotions are the immediate emotions we have to an event. Secondary emotions are where we lose emotional discipline. We start judging why we're angry. We start trying to evaluate what's wrong. And we start being angry about being angry, anxious about being anxious, stuff like that. And so what happens is when we have a negative emotion, but we can be self-aware of it and just be like, I am pissed right now. And one of my tour players, we have a plan that he takes his hat off and he walks down the fairway. That way he tells everybody in his group or his caddy, don't talk to me right now. One is if you do, you're probably not going to get a good conversation coming back at you. Okay. It's not healthy. I'm not in a frame of mind to talk about it. Okay. And it was just like me when I would leave a game. I would throw my glove or mad or yell or scream or something. Then I'd go sit in the dugout and put a towel over my head for a minute, wipe my face. And it just gave me a chance to reconnect. Like, in other words, I just needed a moment to be mad. It's okay to be mad. But I was self-aware that I wasn't going to do anything that was going to be negative. Okay. And that resignation and acceptance, and in this place, resignation is not negative. Resignation is, I can no longer fight against what's happening and I accept my conditions. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming myself because I'm going to move into a healthy self-evaluation. I think a great self-evaluation needs some space between competition. But in the moment, it could just be as simple as, I'll evaluate that later. But man, I got hosed on that strike, but I did not respond to it. I hit a bad shot, didn't get it up and down, and got mad. That's self-evaluation. I need to do better, but I'll evaluate it later. Because when we self-evaluate, then we create an identification of a plan on how to work through, and a plan and a successful plan that allows us to move into wisdom and growth. And just like back behind me, all the books behind me, every experience we have is filling our bookshelf. And so when we have disappointment, knowing that emotional surge is going to happen, don't get upset with that. And don't get caught up in the why. Get caught up in the what. That is the negative emotions and self-awareness and recognition and acceptance. It's those three things right there that are so critical. The recognition of the event and the outcome, it's going bad. It's the negative emotions I'm going to have. That's okay. All my players on the PGA Tour, everybody knows they're emotional. I got nothing wrong with that. Okay. Get mad, get angry, get over it, get through it, and then just accept it and move on as who you are. Then we move into a healthy self-evaluation that allows us to identify the plan, and then we move to wisdom and growth. Okay. What do you think? Some good questions here. Pro Robo and all the other guys, we're going to answer them here in a minute.
You got really good questions. Really good.
What do you think about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I wish I had this. Like, I don't know. It's not like a transfer of blame thing. I shouldn't have a way of like breaking this down when I played. So I was just like, I did what I thought, or I did what I knew how to do.
You
Like,
know what?
This is how I handle it to get through it.
This is the mind. This is the mind side plan. So you probably. I wish I had it too. I mean, my problem was I got lost in negative emotions and fear of judgment by others that were evaluating where I was, and I found myself comparing myself to other players who were better than me, but I never saw the pathway how to get there. So instead of working on how to get better, I crapped all over myself, and I avoided sometimes the hard work that kept me from having the success that I wanted.
Yeah.
So, it's tough. But I think knowing that self-evaluation and knowing that there is a time for it, and in the heat of the moment when we're in a heightened emotional state, self-evaluation is not the most accurate.
No, they're not.
You don't go to the grocery store when you're starving, and you should evaluate your performance when you're angry.
So I got a question. As far as I think it's kind of on the topic, but as far as let's just say after a loss or after a win or whatever, and how coaches handle disappointment or success for that matter, I've heard a lot of times that when teams fail or don't play as good, or excuse me, let's just say when teams lose, that coaches, when they address the team, should be more so not relax with them, but more so, don't jump their throats or jump on their back because of the failure that just happened. And then on the flip side, when a team wins, that they are more open to criticism and fixing problems and things like that from a coach. Is there truth to that?
I've said forever.
Yeah.
During struggle, you support. During victory, you coach. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is that when a team is so let's use social media for a minute. Social media is the absolute bane of my existence. It's great for everything, but it gives every anonymous user the right to blast a player for nothing. Okay. And 95% of the time, 98% of the time, the people who are blasting the players couldn't do what the players are doing and were never capable of doing it. And just because, let's say, you play online sports or whatever, doesn't mean, and you can break it down and whatever, it doesn't mean that you can do that, okay? It takes a whole lot of guts and effort to go out there and compete at that level. I can remember my very first game I ever played at LSU. I came in relief in our second game, and I was a scrub. And I came in, we had like a 12-run lead in the eighth inning. I come in, first pitch, I get a ground ball, get a ground ball and get the guy out. Next pitch, it hits my leg when my hand is going down, and the ball goes about 3/4 up the backstop. Okay. You know what I mean? Like the curve ball came out and it hit my leg. And I can remember kind of the groans in the stands. And I remember my parents saying, the people behind them were like, get this guy off the field, whatever. Well, the next pitch went about 450 feet because I was so shaken by what I had done. The guy just ripped me. I got out of the last inning, whatever, but it wasn't very good. And, one of the things you have to remember is that we don't have access to what people are doing in practice. And so when people have the behaviors and the drama that happens and we start ripping people on social media, we're judging them in the most chaotic moments, the most difficult moments of their career where they're competing to get better. And every player has the right to improve. And despite the fact that we make judgments over people's ability to improve on social media, oh, they're never getting better. You don't know the pathway they're on, and you don't know what being support around them to give them that, right? I remember Coach Saban saying something years ago when he was at LSU when people were complaining about the quarterback. He's like, Yeah, that makes sense that the wide receiver didn't cut off an 8-yard route at 6 yards. So that ball that went sailing over his head was actually thrown perfectly, but you're complaining about a quarterback. And what happens is a quarterback makes those bad throws a couple of times. They start trying to make adjustments, and now chaos is ensuing. Okay? A lot of times what we see are the highest profile positions, and we don't see the mistakes that are happening around it. What coaches see, or great coaches can see beyond the struggle in the moment as a reflection of their shortcomings. Instead, they can see the developmental opportunities that are there. If the players are giving everything that they have, and I'm going to be honest with you, Bash, I've never really seen a player quit in competition. And I'm not talking about Antonio Brown and those types of situations. I'm talking about players that are giving it everything they have. And there are times that it looks like a player is emotionally shut down out there. But it's just like if you open your computer and it's just spinning and it can't process information. It's flooded with content and it's flooded with info. So what's happening is it's shutting down. It's not that they're quitting, but what do you want them to do? Run around like their hair is on fire and look stupid? They're trying to solve the puzzle in front of them. So when players come in the locker room, a lot of times coaches come in as like, I need to support the effort they gave. That it's hard. And the coaches feel as bad as the players do because they didn't get their players in the right positions to succeed. And the best coaches are hypercritical of themselves to the point that they are so much harder on themselves and their own staffs than they are anybody else. So what happens is when they're done, they're supporting it. And they know that they have 24 to 48 hours to come in there and look at the film, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, whatever, evaluate it. We tell all of our players at every level I'm at to get rid of social media because there's nobody going to give you any information on social media that's worth a crap. Nobody's going to go, oh, my God, I never thought about that. Oh, my God, just throw strikes. God, you're right. Thank you, Bob 4726 in New Jersey. I never thought about throwing strikes in the ninth inning.
What a great idea.
Great idea. Okay. And then you have people who are in, like college football or pro football, right? It's like Antonio, Kadarius Toney sucks, never played. Okay. He had a bad game. If you've ever had a bad game or ever competed where it hit the fan, dude, you can feel like you look down, you have 14 fingers. Okay. If you've ever played golf and it goes south in a hurry. Okay. We all get caught in emotional riptides. So the best coaches support. Okay. They want to find and zero in on the small elements that can build momentum positively. But when a player succeeds and a team has success, sometimes they succeed not because they did good stuff, but because circumstances shifted for them. But when they're full of themselves and full of ego, we have to get them focused to get back on the moment. Inexperienced coaches, bad coaches are critical in losses, and it's a death sentence for a coach. It shows an emotionally unstable and undisciplined coach, and it shows a coach that doesn't have a game plan to help players get better. That doesn't mean in the heat of the moment a coach can't yell and scream at a player. That's not what I'm talking about. But I've seen coaches cry with players, okay? And I've also seen coaches go in a hole and we lose them for a couple days, right? We had a hitting coach. I loved him to death, but man, if we had a bad hitting game, you'd lose them for a while, okay? They wear it. But great coaches under pressure, under stress, under a bad performance, they support the team. They take the bullets. They can call things out. I mean, listen, we're all real world people. So-and-so didn't play great, whatever. That's human, okay? But we also can sit there and say, I've got to get our players in a better position to succeed. And in that locker room where it's private, and I hope those things I wish would stay private. The reason for that is there's rarely any finger pointing. The harshest post games that we had were after victories. After a loss, Coach may walk out there and he kept, I don't know if Coach B did this, but he would keep a notebook and he'd write the entire time. And he'd walk out there. And some of the things he'd write down, he'd never talk about because he wrote it down in the moment emotionally that just didn't have any relevance later. That's why we separated. And he'd walk out there and he'd say, hey, Bash, listen, we got to make that play in the 8th inning. Okay. But you know that. I mean, like he's not repeating anything you didn't know. Okay. Got to block that ball. Okay. But listen, guys, we got to get back at it tomorrow. It's about how we bounce back, blah, blah, blah. But after a win, if it was 5-3, it's like, Bash, that 8th inning, man, we got to make that play. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can't put us at that. You're feeling good about yourself, but it's a little moment just to zing you. Okay. And we used to have a very heated one every year. And it was always after like a 6-4 victory over an in-state school. He pulled the entire team in. You guys had him too. So, and he would we called them the FU speeches. And he would turn and rip every single person on the team. And we would laugh about it. They would laugh about it afterwards. But the point got made. What it was wake up. Do not allow competition to define your level of effort and intensity. Okay. Not that the in-state school was not tough, but it was always something in general. And then the reason for that was we were winning and we were just getting by. And he just wanted to dial us in. So in great situations, coach players up. Be critical, but I always teach in my journaling 3 good things that they did. And I saw a comment that's going to trigger this for me. What were the 3 things you did well today? And as a coach, when you're giving feedback to your team, give them 3 things that they did well, 3 areas that they struggled, and 3 areas of improvement. Now, here's the deal, though. Our young players, most players, they can't come up with 3 things they did good in a disappointment because they're being critical of themselves and angry at themselves. You've got to teach them that, and you've got to show them that. Look, you did some things today that were great. 1, you didn't quit. A lot of people would have quit in that moment. You know, what you did coming down the stretch after you had a really bad start, you battled. You didn't mail it in. You represented the game very well, and I give you credit for that. Okay, I thought you putted beautifully. I thought that that offensive set that we had coming down the stretch in the last 2 minutes when we were down by 22, I thought was really good. Okay, that's what we do. So Michael had a question about healthy disappointment management framework. How quickly are the best performers moving through these steps, and what may we observe in an athlete who has accepted and moved on to know they're okay? That's a great question. My experience is that the best, when they're in a healthy frame of mind, those first 3 or 4 steps are happening very quickly. They're emotional, they're angry, but they get to identification pretty quickly. And that threshold that allows it to happen is acceptance. It's not that they're accepting the loss. What I mean is they're accepting the fact that they can live through the disappointment. They can live in that they know that there's a plan to work through it, okay? That they're not throwing everybody under the bus. That's when I find it. So that can happen very quickly. The identification and self-evaluation may happen after the event, and they're going to get back to work. My thing is when you show up the next day, it's time to get back to work. I don't want you to feel that people need to leave happy. After practice, after a game, you don't have to leave happy. You can leave disappointed. Just know that you're leaving in a framework that allows that to happen. Let's go to some questions. And if you guys like this, don't like this, whatever, and Bash can put this up on social media, we'll put this up this week. We'll talk about it. Let's go. Let's ask some questions here.
Here we go. Pro Robo says, staying in the present. How do you do it?
It's hard, right?
That's literally so much impact in such a short question.
So Tibetan monks will spend 30 years in the mountains in silence to try to learn to be fully present, right? The best way to be present, though, in my mind, is to pivot. Your mind will naturally go to the future. It'll naturally pull stuff from the past to try to predict the future. The best example I've seen of that is from the book, The Mindful Athlete by George Mumford, who's the mindfulness expert who worked with the NBA players forever, Michael Jordan, and Dr. J, and Kobe Bryant, and Phil Jackson. And he says, use the fact that we're no longer present as a trigger to return back to the present. So staying present is returning to the present, not staying present.
Jason,
I think we have answered Jason's about tell me 3 things that they did good in their round.
That was more of a comment. Yeah, that was more of a comment. You got to that. Windy City Wake. As a former Division I baseball player, failure was part of the game. Now as a business owner an entrepreneur, how do you manage disappointment / failures differently in business as compared to sports?
Well, if you fail like you did in baseball at business, you're not going to be in business long, right? So it's a different, what we call different reinforcement schedule. Okay. And you manage failure with the idea that the hardest thing that I've seen about people who are former athletes that go into business, including us, is that not everybody's bought into the same winning and losing as we are. Okay. There are team members in business that are just happy to have the gear or just happy to have a place to go every day. And they don't really want to do what it takes to win. And that's okay. You got to be able to identify that. So the thing about is knowing a plan for everybody who contributes to what you're doing, and then looking at the market and having a strategy and game plan to execute. And knowing that you're competitive means that you can take the failures to optimize your process to get better, but set targets and set objectives that you're trying to, I hate goals, but set objectives and like win things. Like I want to win this thing. And if I don't, what did I get better from it? It's just like learning the skill in sport. If somebody got you for, I don't know what position you were, but if you got punched out twice and you got to face David Price again, what can you learn? That's how
try to get hit by the ball.
You're just going to wear it.
Yeah, just get on top of the plate and try to get hit.
Yeah, which would feel great, right?
Yeah, also, just an idea. For the next episode, let's just talk about how goals are overrated.
Okay.
They suck.
They suck. I'm with you.
And we'll explain why.
Yes.
Goals
suck.
Yeah, I digress. Cheryl, can the shift – you kind of hit on this a little bit, but how do you know if the shift is a moment?
Well, if we're in competitive environments, okay, so there's a lot of conversation right now about quitting. It can be good. 100% quitting can be good, right? I mean, we don't want to throw good money after bad money and continue to go down. There's a point. But we're talking about sporting events. We have to evaluate what we're doing every day to improve. And if we continue to do the same things and expect different results, a little bit element of what we'd call insanity, right? So we have to be understanding of how to improve. But sometimes we get knocked off our rhythm. We get knocked out of our slot. We get knocked off the path, and we got to work our way to get back on it. And there are seasons where we just ain't got it. But what we have to do is try to simplify what we're doing and not go down wild goose chases. When we lose emotional management, we start going down wild goose chases, trying to fix it and find savers. It's kind of like we're going to buy the quick fix diet pill versus doing diet and exercise. Okay. Let's do it the right way and build the right plan for success.
Teresa, slower start and then does better. I think
it's a three-pronged question from what
I three-pronged. I must have missed the first part. Slower start and then does better on the back nine. How can she have a better start right off the first tee?
So, Basham, what's the inevitable two?
The starting pitcher for the home team is going to give up 2 runs in the top of the first inning.
60% of the time. And why is that? It's because they walk out of the bullpen. The rhythm of the game hasn't started. The umpire's strike zone is small. They're facing the best team hitters. They're jacked up and adrenalized. And because hitters are not as good of athletes as pitchers, they tend to manage. They need the adrenaline, whereas pitchers need to be more fine-tuned. And what happens is pitchers make mistakes. They try to do too much, and they don't know how to handle the rhythm of the game, and they give up 2 runs. Same thing happens in golf. We go from the practice tee to the first tee and expecting that to transfer. And we have a surge of adrenaline that happens that we may not feel. Okay, adrenaline sometimes is like altitude. You may be at 9,000 feet. You don't feel it. When you go up steps, you feel it. Okay, you may not feel adrenaline, but it changes us. Okay, and so the thing about it is having a game plan for the first 2 to 3 holes. High value, high probability shots that are easily replicated, that don't take too much risk, that we know we can execute and allow ourselves to work into the round.
JJ said, this isn't a question, it's a comment, and I thought it was interesting. I had to throw away some polos because of superstition. If I can find a way to get over that, my bank account would appreciate it.
Look,
JJ, I used to, whenever I get out sometimes and I was just over it, I used to take my batting helmet and like throw it in the trash can.
correct.
I was like, I'm just completely done. That's kind of the externalizing and transfer of blame. Like, it's the helmet's fault. I need a new helmet. There's
It doesn't
helmets.
It doesn't mean you have to wear that shirt again.
Yeah.
Just wear it out on a date or something.
Yeah. I got to a point when I was playing golf really well, which was a really short span. And I'd wear the same outfit every time. So it's
Really?
like if I wore, because the one time I wore like a different hat, it just went to shit.
Yeah, I get it.
So, I mean, there's something to it.
No, there's something to it. If it's taking focus and energy away from what we should be doing, don't do it.
Pro Robos, anxiety and tension are due to self-belief and baggage someone may be carrying, do you think?
As somebody who suffers from anxiety, it's not a lack of self-belief. Okay. It's a common anxiety. We're going to talk about it and kick anxiety's ass. Anxiety is coming from a variety of things. Okay. Some of it's energy that we don't know where to place it. Some of it is trauma and baggage. Some of it's overlearned past histories. Some of it is the desire to do well, us trying to control the environment. There's a lot of reasons for anxiety. We all have anxiety. Okay. It's a natural, healthy emotion to help us identify threat and risk. Some of ours is hyper fine-tuned and doesn't go away. Others can move on and move out like it's no big deal. But it can erode self-belief and take attention away from building and creating positive momentum. Absolutely.
Weston says, thoughts on how to stay on track when things are going well?
It's tough, right? When you're, playing really well, you kind of in a flow state, and all of a sudden you kind of wake up and you realize, oh crap. And what happens is we try to keep things going well. Now think about the word difference. I want to keep it going, or I want to take on the next challenge. When we're trying to keep it going, we're playing in the past. What we have to do is accept it, draw a line in the sand, and start, okay, now let's segment the next section, the next 3 hitters, the next 1 minute of the basketball game, the next 2 holes, something, and segment that and compete in that moment.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good phrasing. I like that.
Yeah.
Must be like a psychologist or something. JJ, again, what do you think of Max Homa on what he talks about on how mental game is tangible? What are some things that you can do to make it feel more that way so you can feel you're actually improving?
Hardest thing about the mental game is making it tangible, right? Because how do you make belief, confidence, focus tangible? We can't measure it. So a lot of times what happens is we see congruence, we see connection and moving in that way. There are behaviors I like. I think journaling and planning your day is excellent. I think journaling your feelings and thoughts are fantastic because that allows you to download. I had a client today, he called and I said, what's going on? He just rambled for 8 minutes. I timed it about everything that was wrong. And I said, okay, the first thing that I always did when I was doing treatment was I'd identify a problem list. Okay. Basham, your wife's a physician. If somebody came in and listed 14 aches, she would stop and say, let's start over. What's the most pressing one first? Okay. I don't need to fix toenail fungus if we're having a heart attack. Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that I try to do is I try to de-escalate the emotions to say, what is the focus we need to work on? Okay. And build a problem list and objective list every single day that I want to do. When you do those types of things, you make them tangible. What Max Homa is talking about is brilliant. I know who he's working with. Big fan of Max, know him well, works with a dear friend of mine on the Full Swing. He's doing great work and he's willing to go there. The greatest thing about the mental game is when I'm working with somebody and they're like, man, did you see that video? Or did you watch that? Or did you read that book by? Like, there you go. The mental game is not a one-stop shop. It is a wisdom growth area. So if somebody's interested in the mental game and they're picking up books on Buddhism or no resistance or a John Gordon book or something from the Bible, I'm all about it. That's all things that are developed. It's like somebody who's like, I want to eat healthier. And the only thing that they're going to eat is they're going to cut out carbs. Well, that's not eating healthier. That's eliminating something from your diet. I want somebody to have a healthier mindset is like they're going to build a multidisciplinary, multidimensional process to their mental game. And those are the things that we look at.
That is all of our questions this evening.
Sweet. All right. Well, listen, we're going to get back at it next week, and we're going to tell you why goals suck. Kicking anxiety's ass is coming. Okay? How to control the uncontrollable force in your life. I think it's pretty good. It may suck. It may not suck. We got Mental Game Live hats right there. I know Tom will be sending us a message. Hope everybody's doing well, and we will see you guys. When's our next one?
Thursday.
This Thursday.
21st.
Oh, man. Okay. Thursday, the 21st, and because I'll be right before I go to the Ryder Cup. Talk about why goals suck, and maybe I'll try to get somebody on and talk about Ryder Cup stuff too. Do a combo meeting.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Thanks again, Bash. Happy birthday. We'll talk soon. To everybody back home, y'all have a good one. Make sure you check us out. Follow us on social media. Tell us where we suck and where we're good and what we can do to get better. Got it.